G'day folks, welcome back to the channel. Well, the title of this video sort of says it all. The Tommy camper now has a second spare tyre, and the mount for that is on right at the back beside the door. And the reason for that, well, that's what we're going to see in the video. So a mate and I went over to Stratty, North Stradbroke Island. We were camped at Flinders. This was day 2. We just have a very unsuccessful fishing trip in the morning. Windy, ordinary weather, and absolutely no fish. We thought we'd do the tripod track. So we hit the sand, and we weren't more than about 3 minutes into the track when it all went south. So it hadn't rained up to this point. The sand was incredibly soft. It was midweek, so it wasn't very busy. We were in quite a deep track, so there was a lot of sand in between the two wheel lines, and the worst happened. We got a blowout in the rear. That blowout was a stake that's gone straight through the sidewall, as you'll see later on in the video. Initially I thought the wheel had just come off the bead, and it would just be a simple case of exchanging the wheel, put the spare on, getting back to the camp, cleaning the wheel out and blowing it back up, or putting the tyres back on the bead and then blowing it back up. But that wasn't the case. So with this, I learned a few very valuable lessons. Firstly, the reason you shouldn't have a spare underneath your car, why a bottle jack does not cut it in soft sand, and the benefits of having a shovel that is actually a shovel and not a borderline toy. This process took quite a long time, probably all up between an hour and a half and 2 hours. The reason it took that long is because the tracks were so deep and I didn't have the forethought to use the winch to actually pull us out of the rut onto a flat surface, which would have worked very well, but I didn't think of that. I just didn't think of that. Me being a boy, just fixed the problem, didn't even think. Should have, but another story. The bottle jack, I had to dig far enough down so that quite a large bottle jack, it's not a standard bottle jack, 8-ton bottle jack could get underneath the springs. I couldn't get it under the diff, or the spring plate that's under the diff. So I ended up putting it under the springs. The jack worked really well on the springs. Unfortunately, it didn't jack it up far enough. What I had to do was, once the jack was completely extended, dig underneath the tyre completely so that I had gap under the tyre, enough of a gap so that I could take the tyre off, but also put the new inflated tyre back on. And I had to dig the spare out. The spare, because of the way the wheel ruts were so sunken, the spare was actually borderline touching the sand before it even began to drop it down. So I had to dig basically a path so that we could lower the spare far enough and slide it out underneath the tow bar. You can see there the massive crack in the sidewall of the tyre. Now that tyre you'll see is on the back of the tyre. It was actually on the front of the tyre, but I'd taken it to the tyre repair place to see if he had a tyre and changed it over. He pulled it off just to see what the crap was like inside, and it was destroyed. It had gone straight through. So the tyres are 265/75 16s. They're Goodyear Wranglers, the Duratrack. So it's a 4-ply tyre plus a Kevlar strip. Supposed to be able to cater for stuff like this, but at the end of the day, nothing's going to cater for a branch that truly wants to go through your sidewall, as this one did. So after I'd repaired it, it was a case of sorting out how to get another spare. We wanted to continue doing tracks. We wanted to do a lot more driving. We had 5 days left to go on the trip. So I didn't want to do the whole 5 days of driving without a spare. So I got my son to meet the ferry on the Cleveland side. I sent the old tyre back, and he sent me another spare to do me for the rest of the week while I was on the island. Just put the tyre on the ferry to go back to Cleveland, where Dennis will meet the ferry, throw on another spare for me. I'll throw that spare under the car, and we're back to a normal car with a spare. And he's got the ruined tyre over there, so I don't have to lug it around for the rest of the week. So all things looking bright at the moment. On returning, got in contact with Dynamic Engineering. They're a good crowd up at Harvey Bay, and asked them if they would kindly supply and fit the bracketry for a spare tyre to be mounted on the back. So the next time I get a flat, even if I've got one underneath, the one on the back will be the one I use to replace. Then when I'm in an area where it can be accessed easily, I'll move the good spare from underneath back onto the back. I got a bit lucky here. I've done a few videos now for the Tommy Camper. Dan from Tommy Campers in Ballarat. He's a very nice fella. He gave me a call just out of the blue, and he was appreciative of the videos that I've been doing for him. I get nothing out of it. I'm not sponsored by Tommy Camper, and they don't give me anything to do these videos. I do them because I love the bit of kit. And he got in contact with me and said, listen mate, as a reward or a thank you for doing the videos, can we give you something? And it just happened to be perfect timing, because I was chasing the bracketry for the spare on the back, mentioned it, and 3 days later it was sitting at my doorstep. How good's that? Thank you, Dan, Tommy Campers. So up to Hervey Bay I go, and took the bracketry with me. They've looked after me, they fitted it all done within a few hours. Once it was all there, I put the tyre back on. I got a chain, so I've secured the tyre now. The bracket's made with holes so that you can put a chain through it. So anybody that wants to knock it off has to go to a little bit more trouble than just unscrewing it. So it's all chained up now. I've thrown the King's tidy bag or King's bin bag on the back. It's not a bad bag. It's not a great bag. I would really like a bag that actually zipped downwards and fell forward, so you didn't have to take the whole bag off the tyre every time you wanted to empty it. As you can see here, with all the bracketry fitted, the tyre just sits in a cradle and is bolted to the back of the wall. The bracketry on the back is just bracing to enforce the wall, so that it takes the weight and the bounciness of that rear tyre hanging off the wall. The final product certainly looks good. I like the look of it. The door doesn't quite open as well as it used to, but it's certainly no issues getting in and out of the van. Would I recommend you getting a second spare? After my trip to... You very rarely get punches. Very rarely get punches. But when you get a puncher and you're left with no spare and you've still got 5, 10, 15 days left on your trip, you feel completely insecure not having a spare. You worry about every single track, every single stone. That second spare would certainly stop the worry. So would I recommend a second spare? If you can afford the weight, absolutely. That's it from me. Thank you very much for watching. Hit that like button for me if you haven't already. Subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.